Good evening, everyone. My name is Angela Fullwood, and I am the supervisor for family and community engagement. And I'm so excited to have with us today Dr. Maria Russ, who is the supervisor of all of our school health services here in Hillsborough County Public Schools. So with that, I'm going to hand it over to Dr. Russ. Dr. Russ, thank you for being with us today.
Thank you, Ms. Fullwood. And thank you, for taking the time out to being with us to discuss an extremely important topic. And hopefully you'll gain new insight and ways to have conversations with your teenager and understand that they're just not little adults, but that we can help them go through the transition period. So first of all, through the adolescent periods, there's certain things that you notice about your teenager. You notice that, oh my gosh, literally they look like they grew overnight, and absolutely they do. So physiologically, they're making all these different changes, and you go, wow, you're driving home or you're driving to a game or you're giving them a hug and you go, oh, one day they didn't smell at all, and now you're smelling these different odors. And then, they always did what you said. If you told them what to do, no problem. But now you notice they're responding back to you in a different tone. And you're like, oh my gosh, what's going on? And then certainly, so that's our physiological changes, psychological changes, and then of course, environmental factors that play into the changes and the growth and development of our adolescents. Some of us are moving, changing jobs, doing multiple jobs. So there's a lot of things that are going on that affect all of us. And in that context, our adolescent, our teenager. So, again, knowing and understanding the things that we're going to talk about tonight: puberty, physical growth, emotional and behavior regulation, which is a challenge and can be very challenging for us as parents, as teachers, as adults, and the community members, as we assist our teenagers with going through their emotional and behavioral wellness. And then really, we're going to talk about the importance of understanding these interactions and within our systems, right? Because there's so many changes that are happening. And our teenagers are discovering that they're about to be adults. So that's anxiety producing alone. And then when they're watching and seeing everything within the stressors of the family and the stressors of us worrying about them, and then they're understanding that they're going to have to make some serious decisions, and you're trying to guide them and make any serious decisions as they move forward with their life. And so those transitions all occur sequentially, but not necessarily at the same time. So, it's amazing because so much research has been done on this issue, and now we have such a great understanding. It's like, major things that we found out, like at 3 years of age, we can know if your child's going to have high cholesterol. So, as we look at children, we have to also understand that they're not little adults, and at the same time that they do understand a lot more than we give them credit for. And so rather they're 3 years of age, 4 years of age, 5, 6, 7, all the way up through adolescence, we have to understand that there's always chronologically age difference, and that's what is even more challenging, because while their physical age may look more than their chronological age, because they can be taller, they could be bigger, but yet they can be a younger child. And so that is because a lot of our children are developing at faster rates, their breast development and their puberty, they're going through it quicker. There's some theoretical things out there and some research that look at everything from like things that are in our food or in our formulas or our milk. All of those things can make changes in our hormones that may be speeding up the physiological changes. But remember, we have to remember their chronological age, that they're not adults. And then mentally, you know, I mean, just besides COVID, which has been a huge mental impact on children and adolescents and families. You know, adolescents, you know, we've talked about this over several segments, in which have felt a lot of isolation. And so that's a very challenging thing, in which you're going through all these different changes. You're not able to see your peers over the years, right? Because a lot of them have been home, go through those same changes, and they think that it's just me that are going through the changes. And then sometimes they find out their peers are going through similar changes, so they tend to turn to their peers. And so that's why it's important, and we're going to talk about why that communication is so important, and for your child to feel supported as they go through these different developmental stages. And then there's social age, you know, so all these things are different, you know, because the different parts of our brain handle these different areas. And so socially and emotionally, and you know, our school district has talked and shared a lot about emotional health and emotional wellness. So each one of these aspects are so important, and they make up, of course, who we are, and more importantly, who our teenager is. So what's the big deal, right? You know, adolescent or morbidity. And, you know, because we all say, well, we were a teenager, and we think that adolescents don't realize or know that we were ever a teenager. And so the big deal is that developmentally, during the developmental period, strength and resilience, both physically and cognitively, are major changes. Yes, mortality and morbidity rates increase over 200%, because, you know, as we have access to guns and driving, you know, at younger ages, and access to vaping pens, and more exposures to drugs and alcohol and so forth, or whatever, to all these different things, it to a young person that is trying to make good decisions, but that part of the brain is not fully developed. It's a recipe for disaster. And that's why we, you know, parents, adults, teachers, everyone, you know, nursing, psychologists, social workers, counselors, everybody, you know, administrators are a team for your child. And so they must establish a trusted adult, and we want to be good role models, and so that they, as they make these decisions that can affect their you know, mortality, we want them to be able to make good choices and help guide them through that decision making skills. And these are just very difficult decisions, and controlling behaviors are something that we expect our teenagers to do, and their emotions. And that's a very difficult thing when their brain is not developed the same as an adult. And so it's you know, they are much more reactive, much more impulsive. And again, it's because they're still have a developing brain. So tonight we're going to really get in and talk about those physical developments, cognitive developments, and psychosocial developments. So again, we talked about this, like in terms of height and weight, right? And so, you know, remember during adolescence, everybody, you know, there's this heightened sense of awareness, right? Because, you know, acne, you know, their hormones are changing. So now they have these, may have acne, you know, different stages of acne, from mild to moderate or severe acne, you know, and rather it's, even if it's like one pimple, they think everybody sees that one pimple, right? So but it's important for us to talk about different things that affect their height and their weight. If they're not getting enough sleep, then they're not producing, the hormones to help them, have a good emotional health. It can affect their weight. They can end up having more, um, fat around their belly. It can affect their height, so it's important for us to talk about having good nutrition, good sleep, over 9 hours. And unfortunately, I know that a lot of our children, our adolescents are taking very rigorous courses, and some of them have jobs and have taken on some significant roles, that are that produce stress, right? And so, as they um, increase their stress levels and they deprive themselves of sleep, again, we go in this vicious cycle. And so, the other extreme is the starvation, right? So many of them are worried about gaining weight, so they may not eat when they should eat. And think about if you go a whole day and you don't eat, or if you don't eat the proper foods, if you eat or if you're eating high carbs or low carbs or no carbs or high protein, all these different fad diets, so it's important that they eat a well balanced meal so that they can grow to their optimal health, to their optimal height and appropriate weight. And then talk about exercise, but we also have to worry about those um, our teenagers when they're over exercising, right? Because there's a balance between eating properly, exercising, so that they can have a good balance. And then there's secondary sex characteristics, so, rather their voice is changing, it's so funny. We were just out with some friends and their son sounded exactly like the dad. And sometimes my son sounds like his dad. And so you can start seeing that those changes in the household. And it's a very difficult time because as we go, when we start talking about stages of growth and development, we talk about Erikson, Freud, Sigmund Freud, and Piaget, those, as well as Kohlberg, you can understand how it becomes, if while it feels like they're challenging you, these are natural stages of growth and development. And I know that sometimes we may not remember when we had different conversations with our parents, and to us, we may have sound like we were never like that with our parents, but your parent may have a different perception, because sometimes I hear parents often say, they're very disrespectful or they're very nasty or this and that. And so again, our job is to try to help them to handle all those different hormone levels that are imbalanced in their body. So think about it, especially if you have like diabetes or hypertension, or any other of these different autoimmune diseases, or different stressors even, how that makes your body feel a different, sense of nervousness, stress, and all of that. So that's what they're feeling as their body go through these different changes to become a young man or young woman. And then remember, it's very important to remember that their brain development is continuing, and it's amazing because we introduce all these different abstract concepts in school. They take all these advanced courses in high school that we didn't take until college, years ago. And yet their brain is not really fully developed, to handle some of these different abstract concepts and thoughts. And so while academically they may be performing at that level, we forget that they're still teenagers, that they're still children. So I think these are really important physical facts that parents need to understand, and also understand that the comparing is even more, can be more detrimental. So rather you're comparing to siblings or comparing to friends, cousins, relatives, yourself. It's every person is an individual. And so taking that into context, realizing that about 4.1 to 3.5 inches per year is how tall, how much they gain every year. And knowing also that girls mature about 2 years earlier than boys. And so that's why those screenings are really important, because in the school we can miss scoliosis if because in the middle school they're screened, but if you wait till high school, then you miss the girls. So we try to time it within that period so that we're not missing things like scoliosis, and then we're also looking and see height and weight wise how they're developing. And then weight gain, really when they're putting on the weight, remember muscles are generally the weight for boys, while fat is for girls. So again, remember we said that, hygiene becomes critical during this teenage period, right? And so all of a sudden you look and your son, you think, oh my gosh, is that dirt on your lip? So now they're developing that mustache and the beard, and and so they are changing. And then, the girl starts their menstrual cycle. And then I remember I've had different parents that come in and they're concerned about their child's penile length, and and trying to get them to understand that no, this is early. And they're like, oh no, I remember I was way different at that age. And I said, but again, we grow at different stages. And I talk to them about their care, that when they can expect the growth to happen and so forth, because there's Tanner stages, what we call Tanner stages, from Tanner 1 to Tanner 5. And it's the amount of hair, from everything from the pubic hair, from the little bit of pubic hair all the way going out through to the thighs, pubic hair under the arms, breast budding for girls, from where you don't see any breast to them to they having full breasts, adult size with the areola out. So again, know that this is a process, and this is again a development over years, in which you would see like their maximum height. And then and it's so funny because I can't tell parents about how much that, yeah, no, they'll still continue to grow, so why, while you'll see the girls growing faster within the middle school years, you'll definitely see boys growing more as they get towards the end of middle school years and high school. And then again, we talked about the vocal changes, for boys, as well as the underarm uh, hair. So it's important for us to talk about grooming and hygiene and body odor, and taking baths. It's so funny because I can't tell you the big change where one point they don't really care about their appearance and not really taking care of themselves, to then I hear that same parent come in and then now they're complaining because they're taking 3 or 4 baths a day and showers a day. So and so remember, they, because their hormones are changing now, they have an increased production in oil and sweat glands. Because of that, now they're going to have acne. So it's important for us to talk about, products, the different type of products that they use on their face, on their skin, washing their hands. All of these are important when sharing how to about caring with hygiene, and taking baths and making sure, because oftentimes they're telling you the truth that they took their shower, they took their bath, but they forget to wash in those different areas, to pay more attention to under the arms and the pubic areas. So remember, as I shared earlier, that brain development is continuing. So it's not completely developed until late adolescence. And this is when they get into college. Their emotional, physical, and mental abilities are not complete. And they may explain, why some inconsistence in controlling their emotions and their impulses and their judgments. So we have to give them that space, because to make errors in their judgment, because they are trying to become independent, and we want them to be successful as teenagers with making good choices and making good decisions. But when they don't, we still have to support them, let them know that we're still here for them. But again, we don't want them to make mistakes that we made as parents. And so they do understand that that's where you're coming from, but they are frustrated because they're trying to figure out who they are. So again, we've had so many advances in brain development and understanding about what's going on in the brain because of imaging. And then we also found that from that is that there's evidence for frontal lobe delay, which is the we found that is the inability for delayed gratification and impulse control, which makes sense of why they can't resist, when they're trying to figure out, is this good for me or not? So when they're trying to make quick decisions. And so, their peers can add more pressure. So, some things you can feel comfort in that you've taught them right from wrong, and good decision making. So they hear and know you. However, there's, the immaturity and incomplete, ness of the brain, because the brain is still developing, may allow for them to still make poor choices. So suggesting that puberty represents a period of synaptic reorganization, and as a consequence, the brain might be more sensitive to experiments. And this is a period of time in the realm of executive function and social recognition. So bottom line, you said, Dr. Russ, what does all this mean? What does this mean for me as a parent? Well, really, it's telling you that their brain is still under construction. And the good thing about construction is we still have time to talk to them and to work with them to try to help them make great decisions as they become adults. So remember, because their brain is still under construction, it's still underdeveloped, it's still a developing brain, they are more vulnerable to risk taking. So so I share all this and we talk about this because while there's similarities in adolescent and adult decision-making processes, because you've taught them, that your values and all of those things, there's still that immature brain in which makes them more vulnerable and more susceptible to peer pressure. So the consequences have not fully been established because they think that, well, I can get away with this, or this happens to other people, this does not happen to me. And so although we share those instances and those examples and all those things that happen, sometimes that there is that ability for a person to say, but that happens to everybody, but that doesn't happen to me. And so again, this is a time that they may do some risk-taking behaviors, but it doesn't mean that's a permanent behavior. So they may experiment with marijuana, they may try alcohol, they may try different things, even with their peers. But, they will quickly learn that, or learn over time the effects or the impact of that decision. So again, we have to continue to be there, be supportive, and reinforce the good choices that they should make. So remember, because they're growing at such a rapid pace, right? Their body can't keep up, right? So they tend to be more clumsier, right? Because now their legs are longer, they feel and look and sometimes look a little more awkward, as they grow. They tend to sleep longer, they tend to eat more, so 9.5 hours. I mean, and they need their sleep, and thanks to research studies, here in Hillsborough County, our school time reflect more evidence-based research instead of just putting what's convenient for schools. So they really looked at the research to try and understood that high school students need more sleep. So having them start school at 8:30 was better for them than having them start school at 7 a.m. Because we know they're not getting all the hours that they need to get in sleep for sleep. And then again, they may be more clumsy because of the growth spurts. Their body parts grow at different rates, and know that girls become more sensitive about their weight. A research study showed that over 60% of girls are trying to lose weight. So we need to help them lose weight in a healthy way, so, and this is a good time because remember that whatever they do to their body, getting enough calcium, milk, vitamin D, will all those things that we talk to them about can affect their bone growth later. I mean, rather they end up with fractures more frequently later in life. So adolescent period is a really a difficult time and a challenging time, but also a time for a great time because we can try to impact their health, which will affect them down the road for life. And over 3% have eating disorders. So we have to be careful about saying things like you look fat or you are fat, and not have so much emphasis on weight and have more emphasis on proper nutrition, and exercising. So I always tell parents this, because I mean, even from toddlerhood, right? They're like, oh, well, my son, was walking by 12 months, or my daughter was talking, in sentences by 2, and so forth. And so I have to consistently remind parents that, and you have to be reminded that we grow at different rates and we don't do two things well ever, right? So, while, words and language and all of that is rapidly developing, the motor things can slow down, and so again, there's that maturation and that awkwardness, and then oftentimes that um awkwardness about showing affection to opposite sex, and they may start asking more direct questions. And so depending on how you feel, or when you're talking to your teenager about these sensitive topics, if they feel that you're awkward about it, then they will not want to talk to you about it. If they feel that you're being judgmental about it, they may not talk to you about it. And so remember, the main thing is we want them to feel comfortable with coming to us and being honest with us about how their feelings, what they feel, what they believe, what they're thinking, so that we can honestly, and then it's really important for us to answer questions honestly. Because remember, they're going to go to their peers, they're going to look up stuff on the internet, they're going to look, read things. And so we want to make sure that we're giving accurate, honest questions, because that's how they will learn that they can continue to come to you for the correct answers. So these are things as what can we do? So everybody in that circle, the teacher, the US parents, the siblings, the grandparents, the aunts, uncles, the administrators, all of us have a part, the student support service staff, um, all have a part in helping this teenager to grow to their fullest potential. And so these are the things that we can do. We can expect inconsistency and responsibility and taking and decision making, right? Because what they think today or will do today may not be the same thing they do tomorrow. But what we need to do is provide opportunities for safe risk taking. So, we don't want them sneaking to do something or try something, so whatever that they're telling you that they want to try. Now, understand, I'm not saying giving them permission to do drugs or this and so forth or whatever, but they need to feel like you're there. And if they make a mistake, that you're going to still be there and that you're not going to hate them and you're not going to turn on them. And I know that seems so easy for someone to say, when you say it's not your child, you don't have to deal with it, or it's not your child, right? Because you're not in that household. But the reality is they need you. They need to know that you love them unconditionally. And I know that's hard when you don't feel loved unconditionally back. So, but hang in there, because they do come around. That just remember that they are a child. They may look like adult, they may seem like they're making adult decisions, but they still are a child because their brain is still growing. And then avoid criticizing and like we talked about before, and comparing to others. Just like we don't want to be criticized or compared to others, we choose different occupations, we choose different careers, we make changes, we reflect in our life, and we make decisions based on that reflection. We want them to do the same thing. And so that's important. And remember this can continue through college, right? They start off with one major and then they change to another major, and that's okay. And we have to support them and let them know that. And then we talked about sleep. They need that sleep. And then modeling. So I know that a lot of us work so hard, long hours. We may or may not be eating healthy ourselves, so trying to have sit down dinners together as a family. I know it's a challenge, because many of us are doing multiple jobs, but that's a great opportunity to try to talk to your teenager and get in their space and asking questions. And later we're going to have a video clip, because it's important for us to ask the right questions. If you ask a closed-end question, right, you give them the opportunities to say yes and no, right? You say, are you doing good in school? Or how are your grades? Fine, good, right? Versus what grades are you getting in science or math or social studies, right? So then that opens up a whole conversation of, well, tell me what's going on in that class. Are you doing, but if you say, are you doing your best? Yes. You know what I mean? So it's again, trying to dig in deeper and find out, what's going on with them. And it's hard because they will want to cut you off. But we have to hang in there and let them know that we're not giving up on you. And then healthy eating, healthy eating, healthy eating. And the good thing too is that, a lot of even the fast food restaurants and different places are starting to have better foods, but again, those sit down meals are a perfect opportunity to find out, and to figure out who they're hanging out with, right? Because, oftentimes they'll just leave out the door and they're coming home with, someone or dropping someone else off. So it's important to ask those questions. Well, who are you going with? And what time will you be home? And establish those rules and stuff. And we'll talk more about that later. Because when you're consistent and you establish, they will test the boundaries, and they should, right? Because remember, that they are trying to assert their independence. They're trying to become adults. They think they're adults, but we have to remind them, that they still have these boundaries, because establishing those boundaries, healthy boundaries, and then trying to um, invite them into that discussion, right? Because there's some things that we can do to try to make it a balance so that it doesn't feel like some type of lecture, but there is an agreement and understanding, and that you're recognizing that they're becoming an adult, makes people feel a part of, and help, and it helps our teenagers to feel like they're a part of the decision making. And then encouraging activity, right? So it's so hard because oftentimes we get home late. The last thing we want to do is go do physical activity. But I can tell you, when you just want to hit that snooze button and sleep, or you don't want to get up, especially when you're stressed or depressed or tired, after you go and you do that walk, or you do that jog, or you do that bike ride, again, it's those good endorphins that are being released. And we want the same thing for our teenagers, right? So we have to encourage that same type of activity, because if they're involved in physical activity, if they're exercising, if they're, that will make them feel so much better, and they will be less likely to engage into these other unhealthy risk-taking behaviors if they have a different outlet, if we train them on a different outlet to release that stress or that anxiety. So when they're getting mad or you're getting mad, sometimes, it's best to go, hey, both of you go out for a walk, or both of you go out for a run. That is another way of connecting with your teenager. And more importantly, provide honest answers about sex, because they're going to ask you things about different contraceptives, or different, sexual questions and so forth, and talking about healthy relationships and falling in love and commitment and relationships, or whatever your family values are. That is critical to have that type of conversation with your child, because they want to have that conversation. If you don't have that if they don't have that conversation with you, they're going to have it with their friends. And so you really want the information to come from you and not their friends. So remember, we want them to have, while academically they can have all these advanced reasoning skills, cognitively, and they can accomplish all these rigorous courses with abstract thinking skills, they have that metacognition. Remember that their still brain is underdeveloped. And the abstract thinking development still continues through college. So again, they don't have that ability to, that they have, to reason. I mean, they can do some reasoning, but we cannot think of them as having the same reasoning, or because remember, as adults, we've had experiences that they have not encountered yet. So we need to continue to talk to them about that. So also understand that they can take other perspectives, right? And they can think about non-concrete things like faith, trust, beliefs, and spirituality. And this is where a lot of times you'll have like some serious conflicts with your teenager, right? Because, if you're brought up in the church and you take them to church, and now they're questioning their faith, they're questioning their religion, beliefs and values, or they may be practicing or doing something that you're not comfortable with, that you didn't grow up with. It's important to have that conversation. But remember, we can, we don't want to be judged, and teenagers definitely don't want to be judged, right? So our children don't want, if they're not going to want to be open and tell you about these things, especially if they don't believe, in whatever faith, whatever values, whatever religion, or they think something's archaic or something's old school, or you'll hear all those different terminologies. And what we have to do is that when they share that with us, Don't feel shocked, because they may tell you something. They may say something to you that you may feel hurt or betrayed or saddened about, because you feel like you didn't raise them this way. They may use profanity, or you may overhear them using profanity. So we just have to remember that it doesn't make them a bad person. It just means that they're, again, trying to become an adult, and we just have to continue to model and talk to them about and helping them to as they continue to make those transitions, and if you still have, it still doesn't have to change. You don't have to change your values and beliefs and spirituality, but understand that, you've lived your life, and now they're trying to figure out how to live their life. And we just want to help them to make the best choices possible. And that's the way that it's a win-win. If we make it about that we are trying to help them to transition into adult life, but we're not trying to live their life for them, then you'll go a long ways with your teenager. And then thinking about how they feel and what they're thinking. Oftentimes, we're always trying to project what we feel, what we believe, what we think onto our teenagers. But that is just going to be rebellion, right? That's just going to invite that. So what you want to do is let them tell you their perspective on things, and then try to be as empathetic with what they're going through. Because remember, whether it's the way they dress, what they eat, or some of the decisions that they're making, whether they decide to experiment with a drug or alcohol, or any of those risk-taking behaviors. Remember, you've taught them what you've taught them, right? And they've seen from you what they've seen from you. And so they have learned a lot. And so what we just have to do is continue to engage them in positive behaviors, positive ways of dealing with stress and coping, because they now have a lot of pressures, and especially our juniors and seniors, right? They have now realized that, oh my gosh, my ride may be over. My parents may put me out. I may not have a place to live, or now I have to go to college. I'm excited about going away with my friends, but so while I really want to be an adult, I still want to be a child, right? Because I like that my parents pay all my bills or pay things for me, or take this responsibility for me. So they're in that limbo because they are still a teenager. They are not full adults. They're moving in that direction, but they have not mastered that yet. So I think this is extremely important, that remember that they don't, and so the hardest thing is that we always like to put ourselves in other people's shoes, right? And so it's okay to do that, but it's not okay to say, I know exactly what you're feeling. I know exactly what you're thinking, because none of us can know exactly what the other person is feeling or thinking. And this is so true for teenagers. So what we have to do is let them share their feelings or emotions, or if they don't, if they do, validate those feelings and emotions. And if they don't, give them that space and let them know that you'll be here when they want to talk about those feelings or emotions. And then you have to validate them. And they tend to be more justice oriented and cause oriented, so everything is about what's right, and everything is about, them. And so you have to look at, they're very self-conscious, it's like even more awareness, and they really feel like the whole world is looking at them. And so they feel this enormous pressure, and especially when they've had a successful, what they perceived as my parents are a success, or my aunt are a success, or my sister's success, or my brother. That's a lot of pressure and a lot of stress for teenagers when they feel like they have to look up or measure up to someone with such high expectations when they already have self-doubt and their self-worth, and they're trying to figure it all out. So the most important information I can say is that we can't take it personally when teens discount our experience, when they discount our advice, when they discount all the great things that we're trying to provide for them, or the values or the beliefs, because they are their own person and they are trying to figure it out on their own. They've heard what you had to say, but some people listen and others, still have to experiment because remember, their brain is underdeveloped. But it doesn't mean that we can stop being parents, teachers, administrators, all those safe boundaries for them. We have to discuss their behavior, rules, and consequences, right? So that we talking about consequences too, and even when they don't make a good decision, talking about consequences for those decisions are critical. And then community service. We know that when teenagers feel connected to the community, that they're less likely to engage in risk-taking behaviors. They again assist with making responsible decisions, and they also learn that there's something more bigger than themselves, right? So volunteering, especially like with homeless shelters and soup kitchens and all those different things, really do allow them to see, how how you have assisted them with their needs and what their wants, and did a really good job, you know. And it's not to say that kids that are homeless parents aren't doing a great job, but this helps them to learn how to give back, even if it's something. It could be something as simple as clothing. Getting rid of them giving clothes to that they've outgrown. So teaching those different types of values, or choices or decisions really help with that adult, brain development, and the thinking and the logic behind what I'm doing, why I'm doing it. And it also makes them feel really good and very proud. And we talked about providing opportunities for community service, and at the same time, oftentimes it's required for graduation too. So it's a win-win. And then asking their view and to share, is important because then they feel valued as a person, right? There's nothing worse when people are talking over you or talking about you, um, or arguing about you or arguing about your decisions. And have not included you in the conversation, you know, on, what made you make those choices. And and I think what's important too is given, if you had to do this over again, would you have made that choice or would you made a different choice? And then what choices would you have done or what decisions would you have done had you, you know, um, had the opportunity to do it again? So I think those lessons learned are even more critical, and a great way to have that dialogue conversation without assigning blame, and then also seeing if your teenager has learned something from the decisions or choices that they made. So this is, all information that I've provided for you. It's a real quick, great way of understanding development, from Piaget's stages of development and Erickson's stages of development, and helping you to understand where they are. And in the essence of time, I'm going to move on because I want to be able to answer questions.
All right. Thank you so much. Are you, I appreciate it. Do you want to stop sharing your screen or do you want to
Yeah,
keep?
sure.
Okay.
Yeah, we'll stop.
All right. Are there any questions? We don't have any in the Q&A or in the chat right now. So thank you for that great detailed information about adolescent growth. I'm telling you, that was so informative. I wish I had this information when my son was growing up. But anyway, because, you know, especially being a woman, a lot of times you don't know about growth development and males, or, you know, if you have children that are not, you know, the opposite sex of you, then, you know, it's hard. But so I appreciate that. I really do appreciate the information. So I see there is a question in the Q&A. Go ahead and ask. Right, type your question inside the Q&A, please. Okay, it said, Dr. Russ, you said to talk about how they think they are perceived by others. How do you recommend us to do that? Great question. Make sure you unmute yourself. Okay, there you go.
Okay. So again, this goes back to what I was sharing, is that so while it's important for them to understand, you know, our teenagers to understand how they're perceived by others, it's more important to understand how they feel, right? Because it doesn't matter what um, others think if they feel bad about themselves already, right? So, so before diving into how they're being perceived by others, it's important for it to get a good understanding on how they perceive themselves. Once once you understand how they see themselves, then, because right, if I perceive myself as a respectable young woman, but others are not seeing that, right? Then we can help them understand that what you're projecting and what you're doing is not matching up what you say that your perceptions are for yourself or the actions that you're doing. Does it make sense? Did I answer the question for that person? Because you can share about how they're being perceived by others once they understand their perceptions of themselves. You can't change a person's perception of themselves, of what they believe about themselves, if you don't know how they think about themselves. So it's important for us to know if they have low self-esteem, or if what image that they're trying to project, so that we can help them assist with that. Okay, but these are your actions. So if you want to be perceived that way, this is what you're doing. So what are the things that we can do so that you are perceived in the way that you wish to be reviewed? So I hope that answered that person's question.
Thank you for that. Any other questions? If they have a poor self-image, how can I manage that?
Okay, so there's a lot of things that we could do for poor self-image, right? So first of all, we need to find out why they have a poor self-image. So we already talked about hygiene, right? Because we know that that's a number one thing that oftentimes adolescents tease each other over, so whether that's acne, body odor, all of that. So we can teach them proper hygiene in advance. Then once we deal with that, then we can again establishing those conversations and putting them in to different activities. And there's so many great, our school district has so many great community partners that do things for both boys and girls to increase self-esteem, you know. And so it could be small things from anything from being in a play, and there's certain things that you don't even have to do to be, being in a band, being in and there's other things that don't require a lot of physical activity that they can be in. So all those things, you know, um, from little things to going and volunteering, like I said, at a homeless shelter or a soup kitchen or giving clothes away to people that are less fortunate, or serving food or, all those little events, even in the community, just getting out there, and trying to make sure that the person has a friend, that they or a trusted adult that they can talk to. All of those things, if we surround them with that, will increase the self-esteem. And then telling them how beautiful they are, how important they are, valuing, a lot of times we can think things, but it doesn't matter. That's why you see some people, like the one girl that jumped off and killed herself, the building, the Miss USA. I'm saying, so, again, sometimes they don't feel beautiful, they don't feel good about themselves. And so it's, or there's something that's so bad that they think they engaged in or, or happened to them that it's affected them totally. So trying to get into that space to figure that out so that we can help them overcome whatever that negative experience or belief is.
All right, and here's the last one. Sometimes they don't feel like they have enough material things, even when they do. What are some things that we can do? I heard you talk about maybe going to a soup kitchen or doing something like that with people who are less fortunate. Go ahead. I was just listening to what you said, but what can we do about that?
Well, there's some great things. I'm going to tell you, fortunately in the Tampa Bay area, we have, listen, I mean, there are some great, consignment and thrifting stores that have great designer stuff and so forth or whatever. So having them go and well, we already talked about, like, they can volunteer at like the springs or the shelters and different places where there are people that's less fortunate, but also getting, involved in like little clothing swaps. I mean, there's so many, things, or consignment shops or thrifting and stuff like that, where they don't have to spend a whole lot of money, or they can take their clothes, or shoes or different things, bag, purses that you've already bought them, and now they can go and sell them at different places like Label Swap and so forth, and get cash for it or trade in on something else, or Plato's Closet. I'm saying, so there's other things that we could teach them about the value of money, about, yes, if you want something else or you want something that's higher end or designer, these are things that you can do it if you don't have enough money. So we can teach them proper ways so that they don't result and think they have to steal something, or that they don't look as nice as somebody else and so forth. So there's ways that we can still show them, and they can make themselves look as beautiful as anybody else. Because we all of us want great and beautiful things, right? So
Yeah, I think that never changes in many of us. We never think we have enough. But so thank you so much for this. It's something, it's never too much information, because, adolescence is a real challenging time. And so we really appreciate you helping us, guide us through this time with our youth, and helping to get us over that hump. And we're always here for you. So we just want everyone to know, thank you, Dr. Russ. And folks, we're here for you. Our schools have a lot of resources, and just reach out to the nurses at the school, the nurse practitioners at the school, the health aides at the school for any information that you may need. Don't be shy. Use us as a resource. We are here in tandem, in partnership with you for the betterment of your child. So with that, I want to tell everybody, thank you for joining us, and have
Thank
a
you.
great night.
Thank
Don't
you.
forget to subscribe to our channel. Good night.